Opportunity for Unitarian Universalist congregations to express our commitment to our sixth principle. We covenant to affirm and promote the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Perhaps Reverend Wayne Arnson, the UU minister of West Shore UU Church of Cleveland, Ohio, expressed it most appropriately when he recently stated, "We UUs are a community dedicated to all that is good and just and beautiful."
We ask that we might be strengthened in our dedication to a better world.
We would remember all those around the world who suffer from acts of violence.
We hold in our hearts all those who are oppressed by forces of privilege and power.
May we find it within ourselves to capture a vision of a future that can be.
Taking courage, friends.
The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high.
Take courage.
For deep down, there is another truth. You are not alone. And that must be the head of the United Nations. UN Sunday was inspired by United Nations Day, which is celebrated annually on October 24th. To understand the significance of these days, one has only to consider the enormity of the effort it took to get these days designated as reminders to peoples of all nations that we must continually seek to persuade, push, and drive our countries, our societies, our neighbors, and ourselves towards actions that encourage and enable world peace. As UUs, we should know that it was a Unitarian lawyer by the name of Frank B. Frederick who persisted for over 20 years, from 1928 to 1947, to establish a day dedicated to world peace. Anyone interested in learning more about this, please speak to me after the service. It's quite a story. Granted, the road to make world peace a reality has been anything but easy. And some might even say it's, quote, impossible to achieve, unquote. We do, in fact, have very little hope, however, of enabling world peace to grow and flourish without the concerted, tireless efforts of those who respect the worth and dignity of all humankind, who recognize that all are interrelated through the web of life, and who are deeply motivated by the principles of justice for all. To enable representatives of nations, non-governmental agencies, and other organizations to achieve such a lofty goal, our UUNO has purposely sought and attained what is known as a consultative status through its work with the United Nations Department of Public Information and Economic, Social, and Cultural Committee.
The importance of our involvement cannot be overstated. From the reach of the organizations just mentioned, to over 3,100 NGOs and over 400 additional agencies associated with the United Nations, our UUNO continues to actively promote our values, principles, and purposes in an effective manner.
One connection in particular stands out. It stems from the membership that the UUNO has on the United Nations Human Rights Committee. Today, our UUNO Executive Director, Mr. Bruce Knotts, has achieved a leadership role on this committee, and along with Charles Ratcliffe, who presently holds the position of Chief of Global Issues for the United Nations Commissioner of Human Rights, they have seen to it that the LGBTQ rights are being pursued. Furthermore, we celebrate today our involvement with the United Nations by relating to you the scope of our UUNO activities, which you can see there. It's our office's contributions, as you can see, are extensive.
In addition, our UUUNO has held yearly youth and adult seminars concerning various human rights and related issues. We continued this practice this year, and it will be concentrating on the problems of Indigenous peoples at the April 2014 seminar. Without a doubt, we celebrate today, UN Sunday, and this year's UN Day, October 24th, knowing our UUUNO is doing a great job for Unitarian Universalist faith and values.
Our congregation, the Blue Ribbon Congregation Award. This is the third year in a row that we have received this prestigious award from our Unitarian Universalist Association. Here to accept the award is Michael Goldsmith, Board President, and Lisa Brody, our Board Vice President of our fellowship. This award is given to a congregation, as you can see, that has at least an envoy to the United Nations office, holds a yearly United Nations service, has 15 members, or 5% of our congregation donate individually to the United Nations office, and is a congregation that donates to the United Nations office via an annual budget line or electric plate, which we proudly do all of these every year. Because of our steadfast support in this manner, our congregation is being formally recognized once again for its dedication to worldwide human rights. The Blue Ribbon Congregation signification can be found on the UUA website. And as a token of the UUA and the United Nations office, we are the recipients of an award plaque. Please take a moment when you get a chance to review the plaque as it is displayed in our main lobby. But more importantly, the generosity that this congregation has shown to the United Nations office is outstanding. Our fellowship is one of only 27 United States-based congregations out of 1,018 congregations, having achieved this degree of support for the United Nations office. Truly, we are a congregation that walks the talk. It is our pleasure as your envoys to formally present to the congregation this year's Blue Ribbon Congregation Award. It goes so well with the other two, the other two awards that Allie is holding in her hands. Congratulations.
Please excuse my voice. I came back from Chicago with more than just an appreciation of deep dish pizza. I'd like to thank Ben and Allie and everyone whose hard work and dedication has made it so possible for us to receive this great honor. When I did fly back, I landed at LaGuardia and passed right by the United Nations. And as the plane is zipping right by, and I saw it sitting there on the East River like a sentinel for world peace and community, I felt very proud because we helped support that. And it's quite an honor that we were able to do this for 3 years in a row. To receive this award for 3 years, many people have to be thanked. Certainly Ben and Allie. Also, there were previous boards, previous presidents that need to be mentioned. Jen, Bill, Royal. You know, I feel like a relief pitcher that's just getting the win and I didn't even get one out. But they laid the foundations for this and their support should be acknowledged. And next year, I hope to be in the audience when Lisa accepts the 4th one in a row. So we'll go from the Triple Crown to the Grand Slam.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. At the Unitarian Universalist United Nations Office Intergenerational Spring Seminar held this past April, Mr. Charles Radcliffe, who was mentioned earlier in this service, was one of the session's keynote speakers. In his speech, Mr. Radcliffe emphasized that as recently as 2008, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex human rights remain taboo subjects at the United Nations. Let me emphasize that. As recently as 2008, only 5 years ago, delegates and staff of the United Nations, as well as people associated with the various agencies, organizations allied with the United Nations, including non-governmental organizations, were not willing to talk about the entire subject of LGBTQI human rights. Today, we are glad to inform you that promoting and advocating LGBTQI human rights is an integral part of Mr. Radcliffe's job. Remember that he is part of the UN High Commissioner's Office on Human Rights. That's how far this has come. How did this turnaround occur? It was our very own Unitarian Universalist United Nations office that was able to get the ball rolling. The UUNO insisted that sexual orientation and gender identity, known as SOGI, human rights, be included in a discussion topic at the NGO Department of Public Information Conference held in Paris, France in 2008. It was at this conference that for the very first time, an organization, any organization, was allowed to lead a workshop dealing with LGBTQI human rights. That groundbreaking organization was our very own UUNO. From 2008 through 2011, our United Nations office kept up the pressure. This was greatly enhanced by the report concerning the extent of LGBTQI discrimination and violence throughout the globe. Who led the committee to provide this landmark report? None other than Charles Radcliffe. As they say, it's good to be king. In June 2011, a resolution to end discrimination and violence based on sexual orientation and gender identity was brought to the Human Rights Council by the Union of South Africa. It passed. It was close, but it passed. I think it was 24 to 18. From 2011 to the present, changes have occurred. Reflecting a shift in sentiment, in 2011, the United Nations Human Rights Council adopted the first ever UN resolution on sexual orientation and gender identity human rights. In a follow-up, the UN Human Rights Office issued the first official UN report documenting violence and discrimination laws and practices affecting the LGBTQI peoples of the world. The report's findings and recommendations were taken up by the Human Rights Council last year, 2012, the first time a UN intergovernmental body had staged a formal debate on the issue. Amazing, 2012. It took all this time. Without a doubt, we can proudly find the fingerprints of the UUNO leadership and its staff all over these issues. Today, UN agencies are on board supporting SCOGI human rights resolutions and policies that previously were not even on the radar. In United Nations terms, my friends, 5 years is a very short time span to have something implemented. Thus, movement from the state of no discussion at all in 2008 to the present stance where the United Nations has established the Free and Equal campaign is astounding. You can look up that phrase on Google it, search engine it, free and equal. It is amazing how much has been done. To foster the goals of our faith that continually encourage dialogue amongst all peoples, our UUUNO sponsors and conducts intergenerational spring seminars each April. This year's seminar topic dealt directly with LGBTQI human rights. Allie, our UUFH youth envoy, attended this year's seminar because we know it is important for our fellowship to get a sense of what these seminars entail. Allie would like to share with you some personal reflections about these seminars in terms of their history, what seminars she has recently attended, and the experience and effect upon her as a teenager. Allie, thank you for sharing with us.
Around anymore. Since I haven't properly introduced myself, my name is Allie Wolf. I am a junior in high school, and I am the youth envoy to the UUUNO. Every April since 2005, the UUUNO has provided seminars and conducted seminars for Unitarian Universalist youth and adults from all over the US and Canada. We gather in New York City for the Unitarian Universalist United Nations Office Spring Seminar. The seminar is 3 days long, and it is filled with amazing experiences. Participants meet incredible people and hear them speak. We also get an in-depth understanding of the human rights issues in the world around us. I have attended 3 seminars, the themes of which were women's empowerment, race and immigration, and sexual orientation. At each seminar, there is always a panel in a UN conference room at the United Nations, rented for us by Canada. Thanks, guys. The other panels are held at the Salvation Army or at the UN Church Center. I really enjoy the panels. During the seminar on women's empowerment, we had the privilege of hosting a Queen Mother from Ghana. She spoke to us about the Queen Mothers and their involvement with the Every Child is Our Child program, which you heard about earlier. My personal favorite seminar that I have attended was the most recent, entitled Sex, Love, and Violence, Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity in a Globalized World. Personally, I have a passion for this topic, as some of you may know. I think a lot of people here do. The seminar was a ton of fun, as usual. There were some really dynamic speakers. My favorite panel was at the UN, and it was about LGBT issues in religion. On the panel, there were 2 reverends, an imam, and a Hindu scholar. That panel gave me insight into how other religious groups view LGBT issues. The most interesting part of the panel for me was when the imam read excerpts from the Quran that showed open-mindedness to homosexuality. My close second favorite panel was the Gender Identity 101 panel, led by Alex Capitan and Bruce Knox. They are both fantastic speakers, and I learned a lot. I know a good deal about sexuality, and I thought I had a pretty good handle on gender, but it turns out I really didn't. Gender, as I learned, is the opposite of black and white. It's pure color. It's very similar to when you're picking a color in Microsoft Word and Word Art, and you have that square with nearly every color possible. And one of the things that I learned is that it's the nearly that makes it so similar to gender. You can't name every color, and you can't put a label on every gender identity. It's things like this that stick with you. At every panel, there's almost that one thing that you know you will remember. You'll leave the seminar feeling enlightened. I know personally I feel a lot smarter. It can change your whole outlook on life and the world around you. It also changes how other people view you, because when you've been absent for 3 days and the teacher calls you out on it in front of the whole class, and you casually say, I was at a seminar at the United Nations, there is not a single person who does not think that is the coolest thing ever. The adults at the seminar are always pleasantly surprised by the youth. We go into intergenerational breakout sessions throughout the seminar, and the adults always directly tell us how insightful we are and how important it is that we get everything we can out of this experience. Being a teenager in 2013, I think an experience like this is crucial. We were born into a time where you don't have to know or understand something if you have a smartphone and an internet connection. The internet is an amazing resource for information and staying updated with the current news, but that just isn't what teens are using the internet for these days, myself included. I get updates from the New York Times, so top stories are directly emailed to me, and at this point, I just delete them. But when I get an update from the UUUNO, I read it. I take the time to understand what is going on because I have an opportunity to help and to make change. How many people can say that? I'm very happy that this seminar is intergenerational, and it has truly enriched my life and my understanding of the world around me. The seminar has never fallen on my April break, and I hate missing school. Oh, so it's horrible. But my mom puts me at ease by saying, you learn more in those 3 days than you learned in 3 years of school. And that is 100% true.
And I might add that our congregation is most appreciative of the work you have done at the UUUNO and the way you have represented us there. Bruce Knotts actually indicated to me just recently he wants to adopt you. And Jacob would like to be your campaign manager for a presidential run in the year 2022, which is by that time you'll be 35 years age. So, perfect. You are truly an inspiration. Thank you so much. For decades, the word gay was almost never heard in formal meetings at the United Nations. Today, after a series of recent diplomatic breakthroughs, awareness of the gravity and extent of homophobic violence and discrimination and the need to tackle it is widespread and is growing. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and his human rights chief, Nabih Pillay, have led the way. In 2010, they launched a global appeal for the decriminalization of homosexuality and for other measures to safeguard the rights of LGBTQI people. Since then, they have taken up the issue repeatedly in public speeches and private meetings, urging governments to confront homophobic prejudice, not pander to it, and to punish violence and hatred, not love. In recent months, our Secretary of State, John Kerry, along with our UN Ambassador, Samantha Powers, attended a meeting with the ministers from Argentina, Brazil, Croatia, France, the Netherlands, and Norway, and top diplomats from Japan, New Zealand, and the European Union to discuss what needs to be done to continue the momentum towards true equal rights for the LGBTQI community. Yet opposition remains entrenched. There is still a large contingency of governments and societies that need to stop this, that seek to stop this equal rights movement. This can be seen by examining this world map. As Nabih Pillay said, the UN Human Rights Chief, she pointed out, although great advances, quote, although great advances in the protection of LGBTQI rights in many parts of the world have occurred, there remains a deeply disturbing pattern of violations. Not a week goes by without my office receiving reports of brutal violence and intimidation, police harassment, and discriminatory treatment. In addition, Pillay adds, those who speak out in defense of the rights of LGBTQI people risk persecution and assault, and even in some countries, legal sanctions. What are the major stumbling blocks that prevent giving LGBTQI people the rights they deserve? The major ones are segments of the population are in effect, they say, segments of the population are in effect asking for new or special rights. They also say international treaties are silent on homophobic discrimination, thus nations are not required to address it. They also say, in many of the countries that are shaded with red there, sexual orientation and gender identity are perceived in those countries to be Western culture and societal ideas. Also, same-sex relationships and non-traditional expressions of gender are, quote, incompatible with prevailing cultural, religious teachings and traditional values, unquote. In response to these obstacles, human rights advocates, amongst these being our own UUFH office, indicate, firstly, that there is nothing new or special about granting rights to all peoples for life, privacy, freedom of expression, and freedom from discrimination. Nothing new or special. Secondly, existing international treaties guarantee human rights to everyone without distinction. There is no fine print in any human rights treaties that would permit a nation to grant full rights to some while withholding them from others. Thirdly, it would be difficult to find a historian or an anthropologist or anywhere to support the view that homosexuality is Western. Homophobia, on the other hand, was all too successfully exported by the West during the colonial era. It is a sad reality that many of the laws today used to punish LGBTQI people were originally imposed in the 19th century by the colonial powers of the day. Fourthly, culture, religion, and tradition help shape societies, but they are not monolithic, nor can they override individual freedoms. The collective, however united, cannot impose its shared cultural traditions and religious beliefs on an individual against his or her wishes. While the emergence of a debate at the UN is positive, there remains a mountain to climb. Re-examining our world map, we see that far too many nations still retain laws that criminalize same-sex relationships. Far too few have laws that offer comprehensive protection from discrimination in the workplace and beyond. Fewer still have adequate systems for combating or even recording homophobic hate crimes. The immediate challenge is to keep the focus on the facts. The human rights violations to which far too many LGBTQI people are still subject to. That in turn requires more systematic monitoring, documenting, and reporting, accompanied by continual dialogue to persuade more nations to take necessary measures to address abuses. It will not be easy to overcome the deep divisions exposed by the current debate. But considering how far this discussion has come in a relatively short period of time, there is every reason to be hopeful that further progress lies ahead at the United Nations on this critical and long-neglected human rights issue. And you can be assured that our United Nations office will remain at the forefront of this fight for equal rights for all.